I may be compelled to face danger, but never fear it. And while our soldiers can stand and fight, I can stand and feed and nurse them. When you hear a quote like that, you probably picture a seasoned, battle-hardened military commander, right? Well, that fierce declaration actually came from a self-taught nurse operating right in the middle of the bloodiest conflict on American soil. Welcome to this explainer on the absolutely extraordinary life of Clara Barton. Today we're going to track the unbelievable hero's journey of a child who was quite literally paralyzed by her own shyness and watch how she transformed into the visionary founder of the American Red Cross. It is a wildly inspiring story, so let's just dive right in. Section 1. Early Life and Breaking Barriers. So our story starts in the small farming community of Oxford, Massachusetts, where Clara was born back in 1821. The woman who would eventually run headfirst toward cannon fire was actually a child so deeply timid that her parents had to pull her out of school because she completely stopped eating. But then, an inciting incident changed everything. When Clara was 11, her brother David fell from a barn roof and suffered a really severe head injury. Clara essentially became his primary nurse for 2 straight years. She learned to deliver medications. She even mastered the practice of bloodletting with leeches. And he eventually made a full recovery. Seeing how incredibly capable she was, but still desperate to help her overcome that crippling shyness, her parents pushed her to become a school teacher at age 17. And she didn't just teach, she built institutions. While teaching in New Jersey, she noticed the neighboring city of Bordentown completely lacked public schools. So she was contracted to open the state's very first free public school. And she was remarkably effective. In just one single year, she grew that school to accommodate a staggering 600 students. That's huge. But despite this monumental success, she was actually replaced as principal by a man. The school board simply decided that running such a large institution was unfitting for a woman. She suffered some health ailments in her new demoted role and eventually decided to quit. So she packed up and moved to Washington, D.C. in 1855, where she secured a clerkship at the U.S. Patent Office. This was completely groundbreaking. She earned a salary of $250 a year, which, incredibly, was exactly equal to a male clerk's salary. It was the very first time a woman had received a substantial federal clerkship with equal pay. However, the historical record notes she faced immense abuse from her male colleagues, and later on, under the administration of President James Buchanan, she was eventually fired due to her political alignment with what was historically termed at the time Black Republicanism. Section 2. Angel of the Battlefield. Everything shifted in April 1861 when the American Civil War broke out. Following the Baltimore riot, wounded militiamen from Massachusetts were brought straight to the unfinished Capitol building in Washington. Clara rushed to the railroad station and ended up nursing 40 men right there in the Capitol. And she certainly didn't stay safely in Washington. By August 1862, she gained official permission to work directly on the front lines. Just look at this grueling, rapid-fire pace. Cedar Mountain, Second Bull Run, Antietam, Fredericksburg. She was constantly moving, distributing supplies, cleaning up field hospitals, and applying dressings in dangerously close proximity to actual combat. What really stands out here is her absolute adaptability on the battlefield. Supplies were notoriously scarce. During the horrific Battle of Antietam, medical stores ran completely dry. But Clara didn't stop working, not for a second. Instead, she brilliantly improvised, literally gathering corn husks from the fields to use in place of bandages to wrap the soldiers' wounds. It's just a visceral, unforgettable example of her resourcefulness. And her work was incredibly perilous. In 1864, while she was acting as the lady in charge of the hospitals at the front of the Army of the James, a bullet tore straight through the sleeve of her dress. It missed her completely, but tragically, it killed the wounded man she was actively treating. It's a harrowing moment, but it really proves the total transformation of Clara Barton. That timid girl who wouldn't eat had officially become the fearless angel of the battlefield. Section 3. Finding the Missing Soldiers. When the Civil War finally ended, a brand new nightmare began. Thousands upon thousands of letters poured into the War Department from distraught relatives desperately looking for their missing sons, husbands, and brothers. Because so many soldiers were buried in unmarked graves, these letters just went entirely unanswered. Clara couldn't accept this. She contacted President Lincoln directly, got official permission to respond, and opened the Office of Missing Soldiers right in Washington, D.C. Through that office, Clara and her tiny team wrote a staggering 41,855 replies to desperate families. And the physical impact of all that correspondence was monumental. Her office successfully located more than 22,000 missing men. She personally spent the summer of 1865 helping to identify and properly bury 13,000 individuals who died at the horrific Andersonville prison camp in Georgia. And over the next 4 years, she helped mark 20,000 more Union graves. She literally brought closure to tens of thousands of families across a completely fractured nation. Section 4. Bringing the Red Cross home. By 1868, completely physically exhausted from countrywide lecture tours about her wartime experiences, Clara traveled to Europe under strict doctor's orders to rest. But, of course, instead of resting, she stumbled upon a massive, global humanitarian movement. While she was in Geneva, Switzerland, she was introduced to the International Committee of the Red Cross. Their mission called for national societies to provide voluntary, neutral relief during wartime. Clara immediately got hands-on. During the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, she set up military hospitals and superintended relief for the destitute in Strasbourg and Paris. Her work was so highly regarded there that she was even awarded the Prussian Iron Cross. When she finally returned to the U.S., she was absolutely determined to establish an American branch. But there was a catch. Most Americans, including President Rutherford B. Hayes, believed the country would never again face a calamity like the Civil War, so they didn't think they needed it. This is where you really see Barton's strategic genius. She pivoted. She went to the next president, Chester Arthur, and convinced him that an American Red Cross could specifically respond to natural disasters, things like earthquakes, forest fires, and hurricanes. That exact argument completely shaped the disaster relief infrastructure we rely on today. Section 5. A lasting humanitarian legacy. In 1881, the American Red Cross held its very first official meeting in Clara Barton's Washington, D.C. apartment, and she became its first president. And she definitely wasn't managing from a comfy desk. She provided relentless, on-the-ground leadership well into her late 70s. She was at the Ohio River floods in 1884. She took workers directly into the Florida yellow fever epidemic in 1888. During the catastrophic 1889 Johnstown flood in Pennsylvania, where over 2,200 people tragically died, Barton led a delegation of doctors and nurses and stayed on the scene for 5 months without leaving for a single day. She even traveled overseas for the Armenian massacres relief in 1896, and her final field operation was the devastating Galveston hurricane in 1900. However, times were changing. As the 20th century dawned, a new generation of scientific experts, all male, began prioritizing formal structure and efficiency over Barton's more idealistic, personalized leadership style. Amid growing criticism that she was mixing professional and personal resources, she was actually forced to resign as president of the American Red Cross in 1904 at the age of 83. She spent her final years living quietly in her home in Glen Echo, Maryland. Before we conclude, it is absolutely vital to note that her impact extended far beyond just the battlefield. The historical record shows she associated closely with the women's suffrage movement alongside Susan B. Anthony and became an activist for civil rights, even becoming acquainted with Frederick Douglass. Yet, throughout all of this, she maintained a strict, unwavering focus on direct humanitarian aid, providing care on a completely neutral basis regardless of the era's deep political divides. Which leaves us with this final, really important question to consider. How can one person's refusal to accept the boundaries of their era permanently reshape our modern institutions? Think about it. Every single time you see a disaster relief tent or a blood drive in your own community today, you are looking at the direct legacy of a timid girl from Massachusetts who learned to never fear danger. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.